Hey, everybody, welcome this week's HR Disruptor Summit 2022 virtual experience. Today, my guest is Lindy Chapman, and my name is Jan Barlow, founder of the summit. So, welcome, everybody. If you would, just please come on and type in comments. Let us know that you can hear us and let us know where you're coming from. So, Lindy, I'm so excited about our topic today, reinventing relocation experience, right? Employee relocation experience. I want to just take us back to when we first met, and a shout out to Aaron Flores for inspired action and inviting me to the North Texas relocation event where I met Lindy. And we were walking into the event and, hey, introduced one another. And she told me, wow, just moved back here from a global assignment, right? Relocation from, was it Germany, Lindy?
Yeah, we moved here from after 4 years in Germany.
I mean, so all of a sudden she started to share her experience, and especially with her background being in real estate, I thought, oh, yeah, we have got to have this topic for this year's summit. So thank you again for, first of all, championing this cause, facilitating the in-person experience around this topic. If you would, just share a little bit about your background, Lindy.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm always very quick to say that I'm a relocation expert, really only in that I've been the client almost a dozen times. And now I'm kind of a client turned insider. So I am certainly not the biggest player. I'm a small player in the pond. But my insight, my expertise comes from having been the client a dozen times. And just that experience, and then becoming a real estate agent, creating a relocation group or a company, however you want to look at it. It's not an RMC, so I'm not a competition with any of the RMCs out there. But my expertise really comes from just knowing both sides of the equation, right? And I think empathy is so huge. And so, I have such empathy for consumers, for clients, for the end users, especially for the partners of the relocated spouse. But then after getting into the industry, I learned a lot of empathy for those providers that often I found frustrating or challenging, some of the challenges, especially when it came to the real estate side of things, that if I had understood better the way the whole system operated, I could have navigated it better and made it a better experience for them as well, if that makes sense. So that's my expertise. It's more just as an experience of having been on both sides of that transaction.
Well, and I have to tell you, when we talk about the three buckets or the three entities that are involved in employee, relocation, right? You have the company themselves, right, that is hired and is relocating the employee. Then you have the relocation companies that are, tasked to move them, right? And then, of course, other realtors, whether it be apartment finders or the realtors that's helping that person, boots on the ground, right? So those are the three basic buckets. Would you not agree?
Yes. Yeah.
So what when we talked about this initially, everybody's in their silos. That's just normal, right?
Which is what I think is so brilliant with what you're doing, is getting people out of those silos.
I have to tell you, it's to me, it's just common sense. Can we all just come into one room under one roof and talk about this? But I got to tell you, it's blowing people's minds because it's never been done before. People say, "Oh, it's a great idea," but wow, I don't know, because different scary, right? Different scares people. But what I just sit there and go, okay, but why not? Like,
And Jan, can I interrupt you for a second? I'm getting notes from people that were going to join saying they cannot get in, that it says that it's waiting for the broadcast. Do you know, have you hit live?
yep, we've hit live. And are they
Interesting.
on the one? Because there was one that I know was sent out by StreamYard. So if there's another one, just the official one with your banner on it.
Yeah,
So
I'm clicking on my view event too that says it's starting soon, and it just says it's waiting for broadcast. So just FYI. I mean,
well, I am looking here, and it says that we are live, and been 5 minutes into it. So
so
is it possible for them to get out and back in?
I can't get in, so I don't think
Yeah,
so.
but you're already, let's just, because if we end it, then we pretty much
No,
got
no,
it.
no, I know. So, yeah, I just wanted to let you know because it
No,
doesn't
thank
look
you
like we're
very
going to
much.
have any engagement if,
We got checks all here across my board that we are live in each one of these.
okay, sorry.
Facebook,
Yep.
no, sorry,
You know
everybody.
what? It's in the HR. It looks like it's in the HR Disruptor Summit page, but the event was created under Jan Barlow. So that is the difference,
They have,
I
they have,
think. So I'm not sure.
yeah.
Technology.
Okay,
Anyway,
I was gonna say, so sorry, everybody. I apologize. We will be having a replay on this. I'm so sorry. Can we just,
no, sorry about that.
okay, so everybody, as far as Lindy, when you were talking about, bringing everybody together, I mean, you've experienced silos and talking to people in each of these silos, right? In the
Mhm.
areas. What do you feel is the biggest challenge?
I think it's exactly what you said. I think communicating. I think communicating what the challenges are from one silo to the next. And I've always said that it is so important we need to have the relocation client, the end user, and not just the relocation client or the transferee, but that spouse or the partner, the transferee. We need to have a seat at the table for them. And I'm really excited. North Texas Relocation Professionals is actually going to have a panel of relocation clients that they're going to be talking to hear from them. And I just think, it's, any company does focus groups on their marketing to see how it's being received or how the end product is being used or what does the consumer want? I mean, we watch companies evolve and we see that happen. And I think there's so much happening in our world, especially since COVID, that we've just got to be listening and be in touch with the consumer, because the consumer, that end user, that transferee, has changed so drastically the last few years. But even before that, they were changing, right? You look at our world and you think about Netflix, you think
Yeah.
about Uber. You think about just Amazon Prime, or now I can order food and have it delivered to the door, and different things like that. We're consumers, transferees. We're used to doing things a little differently. We're used to being in control of the process rather than being controlled by the process. We're used to options, right?
Right.
When you order an Uber or a Lyft, you're not just ordering an Uber or Lyft. You're ordering one that arrives in 3 minutes, and you're going to pay a little bit more, or you're willing to wait 15 minutes. You'll get an Uber XL. You can even get an Uber Green Card now. We have choices. And the way the RMCs have operated for so long, it's really hard to navigate some of those things that a client might need now, and tailor some of those services, right? Because one family is going to need something very different than the next family. One family may have a partner, a relocated partner that works. Another one may not. One may need a school search, another may not. And they do tailor that to some degree. But then there are other expenses, and I may be getting into the weeds a little bit too much, but like I just managed a move for a client, and it was really struck me because, they've always wanted to crate a lot of things that we move, which is great, but it's very expensive. And a lot of times I felt like the crate was more expensive than the good that they were moving. If it broke, it would have been cheaper to fix it. Like, unless it was an heirloom or something that, a precious painting or whatever, those items just didn't need to be crated. And so when I managed this move, that was the one thing the mover kept telling me was like, it would be silly to crate these things. It's going to be just as good, and it's not going to cost you. You're going to have a third party come in, which we always had because the company paid for it. There's really no point. And so those little things, being able to give me, hey, you know what, you can spend an extra $2,000 and get these items crated if, we're going to cover that. But maybe you'd rather have that applied to building your new website because you're moving and you're having to recreate your business again. Or maybe you need some extra school search help, or whatever that little extra thing is. Because $2,000, I don't know, in my world, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And to spend it wastefully. Same thing with corporate housing. And again, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I'm very grateful for the corporate housing we had. But the corporate housing was crazy expensive, especially when today you've got Airbnb. You have other options for furnished housing. how are we navigating that? How are we maybe partnering with Airbnb if we're in corporate housing? How are we, giving the consumer a little bit more control, or the transferee a little bit more control over how that money is spent? Am I using the corporate housing simply because it's provided? Or do I really need it? Or could I apply that money to something else, like rebuilding my business? I did a move in 2020. After I'd started my business here, I built a 6-figure business up for nothing. After we relocated, had my relocation company ready to go. Husband gets transferred. I have to start a whole business over again. The whole business plan, the website, everything. And the move was very expensive, but there was nothing provided or to help me out in recreating that. And I saw a lot of wasted expense. So it was very frustrating, not to be able to control the wasted expense that I saw on that move. And then of course, COVID happened, and that's a whole nother story on how that was handled. And even as we did a survey on people that had heard from anybody, from their real estate agents to the relocation director to anybody else, HR involved in their move, and one person out of I think we interviewed 30 something people, only one person out of those corporate relocation people had heard from anybody involved in their transition, and nobody had heard from the real estate agent. And I thought that, and the real estate agent is the boots on the ground. And I just thought that was interesting, because I think back to all the times that I moved with toddlers or with teenagers, and thinking about how their life would have been disrupted had we moved with teenagers during COVID.
Wow.
Pregnant, right? I remember I moved in February or March, or I guess it was January of one year, and went into labor early and had to call somebody from the hospital. And it was like March. And I kept thinking during COVID, like, what if that had happened during COVID? Who would come pick up my child? We had no idea what we were dealing with. So those kinds of things, that just, we needed that boots on the ground, somebody that's following up, because it's not just the transition from the time you leave one city to arriving the next. It continues. And again, in my opinion, the real estate agent is the most logical person to serve as the boots on the ground for that.
Well, and I did a post today that talked about the stress survey, right? I mean, because when I sit there and say, okay, we say, employee experience, especially with relocation, is so important to help retain talent, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can talk about that all day long. What does that really mean? So it hit me. I'm like, okay, let's talk about stress of what, first of all, let's just break it down. As human beings, stress is not just always bad things, right? It's exciting times, like getting a new job and relocating, right? But then what comes with that? And when I sat there and I posted, if you have a stress score of 150 to 300, you're at 50% risk within 2 years to have a major health issue.
Right.
If you have 300 and above, that goes to an 80% risk, right? Mm-hmm. And when I just added the basic elements of what's involved in a move, it was close to 200.
Yeah.
And that had nothing to do with everything else with the family members. I mean, it had one like the spouse changing jobs, right? I threw that one in there. But there was kids changing schools. There was a change of like your social clubs. Like if you left, if you were part of a 4-H, your kids were part of a 4-H group, or if you were part of a Rotary club, or, I didn't even add those. Mm-hmm. So when, we added the case of a person, if they were relocating for a new job because of a death of a spouse, that was 100 added to it, right? So really, to get people to understand, as an employer, you expect that employee to show up the first day on the job fully present. Well, I got to tell you, after some of the stuff that you shared with me, I mean, really, what do you really expect that to happen? I think what really prompted me to collaborate with you on the in-person summit is because you have that experience, boots on the ground, plus the experience as being a spouse of the relocated employee. You can have a panel sit and tell you everything about their experience and hear people, people can listen to it, professionals can listen to it, but it's going to be up to them to go back to their offices and change their individual process, right?
Yeah.
What do you think the chances of that? That's why I
Well,
like the
it's
summit.
a big ship to change course. There's a lot of money, in it. There are a lot of processes and relationships and stuff that have been built over time. It's been done this way for decades. We've been working with an outdated real estate industry for decades, and nothing against. I'm a real estate agent. I work for a big brokerage, but it's a different kind of brokerage. I started out with a more traditional brokerage that does handle most of the relocations for some of the big companies and some of the big RMCs. But there was a disconnect, and there's going to be more of a disconnect as buyer agent commissions change. If the DOJ wins its lawsuit, which it's interesting to me that in relocation, people aren't talking about what's happening in the real estate industry,
So
and
let's
how
talk
that's
a
going to
little bit
change
about that
things.
and how is that going to affect this employee relocation process?
Well, it all depends on how the company is moving people. If they're working with an RMC, or if they're giving them a lump sum, or how they're doing it. But if you're working with a traditional RMC, one of the ways the RMC offsets cost is by taking a large percentage of that real estate commission. And it's one of the reasons why we've not seen companies start working with 1% listing companies, right? Because if 1%, if the home is listed at 1%, they're giving 3% to the buyer's agent. But all of a sudden, 1% on a $500,000 home is about $5,000. And in the past, it's been $15,000. But they're not doing that because it's 3% is a listing. So that's $15,000 on a $500,000 house. And, 10-20% of that may go to the brokerage, up to 42%, 45% goes to the RMC, and whatever's left is paid to the real estate agent. Well, so you can see that if you take a $15,000 pie and you narrow it down to a $5,000,
Yeah.
the piece of the pie gets really small really quick. And that was a challenge for us, that the way it worked when we were moving, and we would have one agent assigned to us, and we would have, and it was always, and what I didn't know, and this is where I'm like, oh my gosh, if I'd known that, I would have changed the way I worked with agents. I would have known the questions to ask to make sure I had the right agent. But the agent was only making about 50% of the commission. So now I know why their eyes rolled in the back of their head when they thought I was going to be buying a certain price home. And I looked at them and I was like, no, that's not what I know you've been showing my husband those homes, but we have 3 kids in college. I've had to quit my job. Like, no, we're going to buy about a third, half of that, or 2/3 of that. And then when I wanted to add another city after we had looked in a couple of areas, and then I'm like, I think we need one more night, or one more weekend, or one more day. Their cost per hour is going down by the minute as they're talking to
Right.
me. Because I didn't mean to be high maintenance. I don't think I was high maintenance, but I needed help with the school search. I needed help figuring out, where do I belong? And here's the interesting, and this is one reason I know, Chris and Lynn Greenberg with Pivot. And one of the reasons I'm really excited about what they're doing is because there's this emotional component to it. And RMCs are not in the emotion business, right? Companies are not in the business of managing the emotions and the social lives of their employees, right? I get that. But that real estate agent really is that boots on the ground. And now that we have technology where we can really help a client find where they belong. But what's really interesting to me is that's really become more critical in the last few years because of COVID. Because now I may not have really a workplace where I'm getting my social needs met, or able to collaborate and find out, hey, Sally's husband also is an entrepreneur in Dallas, and maybe my spouse or my partner would love to connect with him, and or this person's spouse also has 2 toddlers under the age of 4, and maybe the spouses could connect. We don't have that same kind of connection going on in the workplace. The other challenge is now I may move to a new city, and I no longer need to be within 10 miles of the office. I might be homeschooling my kids. I might need a bigger home, and I can't even afford to live in 10 miles with the office, because now we need 2 offices at home and a schoolroom, and because I'm only going into the office 2 to 3 times a week. So now all of a sudden, the geographic territory for a real estate agent helping a relocation client find a place to live has expanded in this huge radius. And it's too much for anybody to cover. I mean, that was a big problem for us, was having an agent and then finding out they were not an expert in the area that we were looking. And so they were nowhere to be found once we closed on the transaction. But now it's even harder. So just that old way of doing things with the real estate industry, in my opinion, it just doesn't work. And then when those real estate commissions, that buyer agent commission, when that changes, and it is, in fact, I have a graphic I could show on the screen of a recent, or I can share it later, but I had a recent transaction. I was helping a
Go ahead and pull it
500,000.
up. You can pull it up, so it'll be on the recording.
Let me see if I can pull it up.
Right.
It won't let me do it unless you change something. Oh, wait, maybe that's me.
Yeah, just hit
That could be me. So, it may not let me do it. So,
yeah, we'll add it into a link. That's all right.
sorry.
That's okay.
Anyway, but I was just looking for a client moving here from California, and I pulled up about 50 homes. And I thought, just curious, I'm going to look and see how many of those are offering what the buyer's agent commissions are. And half of them were offering less than 3%, from 1% to 2% to 2.5%. I make 100% of my commission. I've already capped. I don't pay relocation fees. I don't pay lead generation. I don't pay Zillow. I can afford to show a home that's only offering 1-2% commission. But if I was paying 50% out in referral fees and in relocation fees,
Right.
I couldn't do that, especially for a client buying something less than 500,000.
Right.
And most of people relocating aren't executives, right? So
Right.
that's going to be real challenging when that number really changes. And the DOJ has got a lawsuit against NAR saying it's antitrust, and there's some challenges with that. They're talking about uncoupling it, and so that's really going to change the way that real estate piece works. And again, I'm not here to be a disruptor for the sake of disruptor. I'm innovative. I see problems, and I like to look at ways to solve them. I want to stay relevant. I want my colleagues to stay relevant. And then I want my fellow relocated employees and friends to get the service that they need. And I don't think it's complicated. I'm not going to give away my secrets, but it's not complicated.
Right.
I think it's just, you got to do a little 180 and look at it a little differently and say, how can we do this in light of all of these changes? The changes in the real estate industry, the changes in today's consumer, work from home, all the new challenges that have happened in this last couple of years.
Well, and I think that's the basics of how coming together to be able to talk about it and say, how can we look at this differently? What do we need to do? How does that affect everybody in their silo, right? Each of the industries. What are those challenges? What's the challenges for the RMCs? What's the challenges for realtors? What's the challenges for, coming from the company standpoint? And I think it's really key for your engagement session coming from the realtors, frontline worker, right? The front
Yeah.
line with the
They are the
employee.
boots on the ground. I mean, to me, in all of our relocations, right, you can spend whatever you want to moving us from place to place, our household goods. If something gets broken, that's fine. We can pay to fix it, or the company will pay to fix it. But if I don't get my child in the right school, if I don't find where I belong, if I'm not able to quickly kind of get connected as that relocated spouse or partner, more so probably than the relocation employee, though my husband has actually been asked to write a piece in a book on repatriation from a employee standpoint, because he has a lot of thoughts on that as well, because there's some real
Right.
challenges for the employee, but there are a lot of challenges for the partner, for that relocated spouse. And honestly, we are the driving force behind that employee. We are one of the most important pieces in the equation. If we're not happy, if we don't get the support we need, then that employee's going to have a real hard time doing their job if they're having to, manage some of the stuff that doesn't get managed otherwise. And I think until you've done it, it's really hard to realize how hard it can be, how taxing it can be on that relocated partner. Here's the beautiful thing, though. I have a network of relocated partners around the world, and they have created coaching businesses and job transition businesses and networks of other relocated employees or other relocated spouses. I'm in a group called Families in Global Transition. Such a great resource. We have boots on the ground all over the world, literally, that if you were to call one of us and say, hey, we've got a client moving in, they're working with a real estate agent, but they just need somebody to just drive them around. And we have DSPs and people that do that, but that's usually reserved for a certain, not everybody gets that. But even if I just had somebody to talk to that had also moved to Dallas from
Yeah.
Germany, right? Those little things. And this is what I love about what Pivot is doing. Those little things make a huge difference, and they're not expensive. It's a lot less expensive than creating my items that don't need to be created, or telling me that you can move all of my household goods to Boston, but you can't. This has happened. This is a true life story. But no, we can't move things just to a storage unit in Dallas. And we're like, but why not? Because it's going to cost a lot more for you to move it to Boston, and it's going to cost us a lot more to storage it in Boston. It's 4 times the cost to store in a storage facility in Boston than it is in Dallas. And we were downsizing. We didn't need our stuff. We didn't want to get rid of it. And it took battling.
Wow.
It was a long battle to win that one. We did win. But at first they were like, no, we can only move all of your household goods to Boston.
Only because they've never done it before, or that person didn't want to think outside the box on how to do it.
It's probably a combination of things. The RMC makes money off of that. Their vendor makes more money by moving it to Boston than moving it. The company's more than happy. I would even hate to tell you what the cost of that relocation was, because I did a little digging afterwards to find out just how much it cost. You want to take one guess what it cost to move a family of 2?
Go ahead, tell me.
To Boston, including 6 months of corporate housing.
From
Want to
here?
take a guess?
From Dallas to Boston?
Dallas to Boston.
How much?
$180,000. Now that was marked up to cover taxes, because there was a tax, all that stuff. Yeah. And I found the buyer for my house. That was another thing. And that's another long story I won't go into. I found the buyer. They wouldn't let me list the house. But if I found the buyer wanted to do this for sale by owner, they wouldn't cover they wouldn't pay me back the fees for selling that are included in the reload package. So it was like, so I'm telling you, I can save you a lot of money and just make this go away and make it done and easy. I just need this much to kind of can't do it. So I ended up telling this person who wanted to buy my house for sale by owner with a reduced fee from what it would have been if it had been on the market. And I just had to say no. And she ended up buying the house anyway. But then she found an agent. They had to pay that agent 3%. They had to list it with their agent. They had to pay her. She didn't do anything because I'd already found the buyer.
Right.
Anyway. So, and that's an unusual situation, but what I'm saying is on a $500,000 house, it's typically about a $30,000 commission. How can we do that differently? Because even 30,000 is a lot of money.
It is. And
especially if you don't have somebody staging it for you, helping you get rid of stuff, right? I think that's just there in today's economy with listing. I mean, you have listing agents that can do the paperwork. Let's get them to do it, and let's get somebody else like a Caroline Carter or who's somebody I've done in the day. She's written a book called Smart Moves, or somebody like that, a stager, an organizer to do the other stuff that helps the house sell. It just makes sense to me.
It just makes sense. We have someone that just a LinkedIn user commented, totally agree with that as a relocating partner for multiple times. So, so people are really understanding and your message that we're speaking about is resonating with people. So thank you for chiming in here. When we think about your engagement session for the in-person summit, we want to call people from HR, right? Relocating, if that's even if it's not, if you just want to know more about it, right? We want to invite you. We want people from relocation companies. We want realtors. We want apartment finders. We want to, people that have experienced it firsthand. This issue, we want them to be part of the conversation and part of the solution session. What I like about your session is exactly that. It's going to be an engagement session and your lab afterwards to create a beta project that's going to bring, whether we have just maybe HR people, we don't know. We're bringing everybody together and we'll see who shows up, right, to see what we can put together. But to come with an open mind on putting a beta project together from the lab of theory to implementing something, right? That's going to change. Like, let's create a new model. Let's not have a lot at stake, because we're coming together, right? But it's mostly coming together with that open mind to try to do something different, right?
Yeah. And I think I don't have the answers. I can tell you what the problems are, but I don't have the answers. And I can probably tell you problems that you're not aware of. In the, if you're in a, depending on what part of the industry you're in, and you're going to be able to tell me what the problem with my problem that I see. Right?
Yeah.
You cannot operate in a silo
No.
because you don't know what's going on outside of that.
Right.
And so even though I see a lot of problems, I see the challenges from that relocated employee perspective. It was like I said, when I worked with a real estate agent, I didn't realize all the things that real estate agent was dealing with and all the paperwork that was generated and the fact that she was making less than 50%. And then here I am asking her for another day. Of course she was frustrated with
Right.
me. She had also never moved. So she didn't understand that I wasn't being spoiled or demanding. I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so that's that collaboration, I think, where we can learn from one another. And because here's the beautiful thing about this business. We're in this business because we love people. We're in this business because we're customer service oriented. I don't know anybody in this industry that I would say they don't care about. I mean, they're all in this business. When I think of an Aaron Flores or a Bruce Waller or any number of these people that I know that are involved, they love people. They're caregivers. That's why we want to be in the business. We want to be the best that we can be, but you can't be the best at what you want to be the best at if you don't know everything you need to know.
Right. Well, you don't have
And
to,
our world has changed.
right.
Our world has changed in the last 2 years.
Well,
Everything about it.
I think what I love about you, Lindy, is you have relationships across the board because you understand the value of relationships, right? And pick up the phone and say, hey, can we find a solution for this? And that's another positive aspect that we want to create when we're crossing industries, right? We're not just focused on the HR side. We're not just focused on the real estate side or the relocation side. We want to bring people together to talk about what are your issues on your end? What are the pains? Well, what can we do? And that's the whole purpose is we don't have all the answers. The a first solution or a new solution to start with is going to start there in that lab because we don't know who's going to show up as part of the soup, right? And that's really one of the exciting pieces is we don't know what we don't know, but we know if we come together, we're going to try something new and different.
Yeah.
Right.
And collaboration. I mean, I think collaboration is key. And again, I go back to the people that are missing at the table are the end user. And I go back to the relocated spouse, the transferee spouse, the transferee partner, the accompanying talent, I think is the new word for it, right? It used to be trailing spouse. Now it's accompanying talent. I was not accompanying talent when I was having babies. I was a relocated spouse. I mean, I was, but those people have, I mean, that was the big thing for me when I moved to Europe that I found so different in all my other moves is because they understood the importance of having that community. And I found a community really quickly. And those spouses, those partners were excellent at picking up where the relocation left off. And so what I'm saying with people like Pivot, and now you've got technology with people like Naveen Edelsuki, who's got a huge expat coffee group, Facebook group, and others, FIGT. We have these communities that we can plug people into. I didn't learn about those communities until our move back to the US, which was a disaster, by the way. And my son ended up in 3 different high schools, and it was a mess because we didn't have the support that we needed. Right. And I gave a talk on repatriation at an international conference because that is a really important thing to think about how we treat those families when they're returning to their home country. But again, we have this whole massive, what's the word I'm thinking of? Resource at our hands through these relocated partners that have created amazing businesses, groups, to support people that let's tap into that instead of talking about there's a big study with EY that talks about relocations that fail because of an unhappy partner. And it's like 87%. I can't remember exactly what the statistic is, but it's the ones that fail, 87% of it's because of the relocated partner, but not many relocations fail. So it makes it look like relocated partners are they're the problem.
Right.
I see them as the solution. Let's look at the 87% that didn't fail. let's engage them. Let's find ways to pull them in and tap into those resources and help these other people find them. Like I said, I didn't find those groups until we really did have a relocation that failed and I was desperate. So it's not complicated, but it just takes asking the right questions.
Well, and again, in trying something different, asking.
Okay, that's complicated.
Yeah, I know. Don't get it twisted, right? Don't get it twisted. Well, again, thank you so much, Lindy. We're really, really so appreciate your insight and being part of this collaboration. And we really want to make sure that we invite all the people at the table for the table, right? So it's
Right. Yeah. If you're listening to this or listening to this on record and you want to be a part of the summit, get in touch with me or with Jan and find out. Would love to have your voice heard as you weigh in on this. I don't care if you're in the household moving goods, if you're
yeah,
a director of relocation at a real estate company, if you're short-term housing, if you're HR, if you're a relocated spouse, we would love to have you there.
absolutely. And there's a limit to the summit. We will have 120 attendees. So it's going to be for the few, but we really want to have people that want to be engaged, want to roll up their sleeves, be part of the solutions, and be part of these beta projects to try something new and to think differently.
Awesome.
Lindy, thank you so much, my friend. And everybody will be having the chat open at the summit on LinkedIn. So please add your comments for the recording and hope to see you again next week. Thanks again.
Okay. Thanks.